Nine Sols is an incredible game. It has exciting and precise parry-based combat, a vast Taopunk world, and my favorite sort of story in a video game. One that doesn't waste your time, but still really packs a punch. At the core of Nine Sols, there's a fundamental decision that everything else revolves around. Use a relationship with Aitman and his fellow Solarians. His actions in the past and present, and the very world that the game is set in, are all informed by how he continues to run from this terrible truth. And so in this video, I want to take a look at it all. At the characters in the story, the history of Solarians and New Kunlun, and I want to look at the Taoist philosophy and the Chinese mythologies that inspired this story. I am by no means an expert on these subjects, so this video will mostly be a basic introduction to the mythology and to the philosophy and religion behind Taoism that inspired this story. But I've done a decent amount of research and I'm trying my best to get the facts straight. This video will spoil all of Nine Sols, and so if you don't want to be spoiled, then you should leave. I'm also not going to be giving a plot summary or anything here. There are already some good videos that cover that. This video is not going to be a good substitute for actually experiencing the story, which you definitely should, as the game is seriously fantastic. It has awesome art, some top tier boss fights, and a great metroidvania world. Few games in general have hooked me as well as this one did, so be sure to check it out and support Red Candle Games, who are the developers out of Taiwan. Anyways, it's all spoilers from here on out. Thanks for watching, and let's get started. So first off, I'm just going to start off with a bit of an introduction to Taoism or Daoism. Taoism is a Chinese religious and philosophical tradition, believed to have been founded by Lao Tzu at around 500 BC whenever he wrote the Tao Te Ching, one of Taoism's fundamental texts, with the other fundamental text being the Zhuangzi, written by Zhuangzi a few centuries later. Tao Te Ching creates the philosophical base for Taoism and defines the Tao as the source and ideal of all existence. It is unseen, but it is also immensely powerful, yet supremely humble. It's the root of all things. Zhuangzi, on the other hand, is filled with stories that explore Taoism and establish many of the attributes of a Taoist sage. It's also quite funny. In the Chinese language, Tao or Dao literally translates to path, both a literal path and a word for a way of going about your life, to search for truth or a way to structure society. Within the books behind Taoism, the name is used almost ironically, as the Tao is something that is free of purpose and specific guidelines, rather than a distinct path to base your life on. The Tao is the way of nature, it's the natural flow of life, and it's the substance of existence. Everything is just a different expression of the Tao. It's not something that can be understood, but it's also literally everything. A bit confusing. For a Taoist, the goal of life is simply to live in harmony with the Tao, which means to live a simple and spontaneous life. And a big part of that is Wu Wei. Wu Wei, which is often translated as action without effort, is not apathy, just acceptance of the ways of the universe. You let things happen and ride the wave. You don't sit around and do nothing, but you do much with little effort. The Taoist sage just gets stuff done, but he doesn't brag about it and he doesn't overexert himself. Getting stuff done is just what he does. The Zhuangzi in particular more actively opposes the self, as Taoism teaches that it's an illusion and that nothing is real but the Tao. So you aren't supposed to impose your own will on nature. Early on in its history, Taoism took heavy influence from shamanistic influences and from yin and yang, which are associated with Taoism nowadays but are actually even older concepts. Some believe that earlier Taoism, which they call philosophical Taoism, was not religious, and that the modern religious ceremonies and beliefs only came about later. But this isn't really true. Both religious and philosophical Taoism came about and were practiced hand in hand, as the philosophy and religion are both integral to Taoism, and it's just completely incorrect to separate them. Other important aspects of Taoism are the three treasures of compassion, frugality, and humility. Centuries after Taoism began, Zhang Daling, a religious leader, was supposedly visited by Lao Tzu in a dream, which is where more organized Taoism began. In modern Taoism, practitioners perform both external alchemy with physical materials and internal alchemy, which is cultivating one's soul away from evil inclinations. And they also have lots of rituals, meditations, qi, deities, and a lot of connections with Chinese folk religion. You can find out more about Taoism from this video by Let's Talk Religion on YouTube, as it was the main source for this video. There is obviously so much more to the religion, but that's beyond the scope of this video, as I'm just giving a background to the story. Also, I think it's worth quickly mentioning the mythological background behind the settings of Bengali and New Kunlun. Kunlun is a real mountain range, while Bengali is a legendary one. However, in Chinese mythology, the two are seen as two different paradises, where Kunlun was seen as a distant, exotic, and mysterious place of divinity. Bengali, on the other hand, is a place where the elixir of life is. And it is also the location of Pengali Palace, which houses many immortal beings. On Mount Pengali, there are magic items everywhere, from endless rice bowls to fruits which bring back the dead to trees that grow jewels. Some other versions of the legends reject Pengali as a paradise, however, but instead focus on how it is composed of quintillions of souls, whose perceptions and intelligence can be gained by breathing them in. And even other versions of the legends just say that Pengali is actually just Japan and it's really cold there. I think in-game connections for these two names and places are a little bit less obvious than most other mythological connections in this game. For one, New Kunlun in the game of Nine Souls is a place where there is infinite life and seemingly infinite food and pleasure in the simulations, which correlates closer with the mythos behind Bengali. I think that many independent ideas were lifted from the two areas as well as their names, but they weren't kept too super closely. Finally, while it might just be a coincidence, I think it's interesting that Bengali and Kunlun were seen as two different paradises in Chinese mythology. It is an important part of the story of Nine Souls was the choice between staying on Bengali and returning to the Tao, or of living within the simulated paradise of New Kunlun. Yi's the main guy, or cat/Solarian thing. At the beginning of the game, he appears as a mysterious but pretty simple character, who's seeking out revenge. While he's obviously got a soft spot for Shanshan, it initially seems like this story will just be one of seeking revenge against the Council of Souls, presumably for leaving Yi to rot and creating this horrifying 8-man farming machine. Of course, we eventually realized that Yi was actually the person who suggested kidnapping the 8 men and harvesting their brains in order to use them for processing power. I think it's very interesting how the game slowly shifts our perspective on Yi as the story goes on, and as we learn more and more about him, we come to both empathize with him more, seeing his home planet die and seeing how he's separated from Heng, but we also see that his revenge isn't as valorous as we might have once originally thought, as well as the terrible things that he's done. Atrocities targeted towards his species, which seems an awful lot like humans, which makes it all the more easy to empathize with their plight. Growing up, we see that Yi was raised in a world that shunned technology, and his family in particular were a group of fundamentalist Taoists who disliked all technology, believing that it would lead to terrible weapons that would bring only violence. And as we see in some of the flashbacks, much of Bengali is a site of ruins of the once great Solarian Empire. Huge rhizomatic columns that once stored power cover the landscape. Yi was drawn to seek out the mysteries of the past and pursue technological innovations in order to try to improve the lives of all Solarians. Though he denies it whenever Hing points it out, another one of the main reasons that Yi pursues science is in order to prove his parents wrong, to prove himself right, and prove everybody else wrong. He believes that his parents' worries are unfounded and simply born out of ignorance. Yi espouses that science is a tool that is neither good or evil, but it can be used for either by whoever wields it. I think it's clear that he's correct in pointing out the problems in his parents' worldview towards science, as there are obvious benefits towards technological advance, and shunning all change is just irrational. However, because of this experience growing up, Yi adopts a very cynical outlook towards religion and philosophy. He ignores all which he can't logically understand and rushes towards technological process without first thinking of the possible consequences and without also advancing culturally and religiously. And as we will see, this sort of thinking will lead to the downfall of the Solarians. And as he grew older, Yi began to grow further apart from his parents, and he spent more and more time working in his lab, working on using the energy of the Fusang tree roots in order to power his own inventions. He's doing this all in order to impress Yigong, who will soon be visiting his town. Hang mentions that she has been seeing the very key energy which she is drawing upon in her dreams, and Yi shuts her down, insisting that her beliefs are nonsense. He doesn't want his precious science to be associated with Hing's Taoist beliefs, which he believes are illogical and superstitious. I think that Yi and Hing can both be seen as two separate sides of scholarship, with Yi focusing on material reality and science, while Hing is more interested in philosophy and religion. And while Yi is often correct in his calculations and experiments, he also lacks empathy and completely ignores the mystical natures of the very roots which he studies, and much of the rest of nature. And as his experiments continue, Hing warns Yi that she's been hearing the roots cry out in pain, and begs him to reconsider doing the experiments. Yi believes that since his calculations were seemingly right, there's nothing to fear. He once again ignores her worries because he believes that science can protect him. But something goes wrong and Yi is injured in the explosion. As Heng holds his dying body, the roots react to her grief, wrapping around the two of them and saving Yi from the brink of death, or possibly even reviving him. We later on see that Yi is thought by many to have a unique connection to the Fusang roots, but in reality, Heng was the one with a close connection to the Tao, and the Fusang tree did her a favor by saving him. In the end, what really saves Yi isn't his careful calculations or his science, but Heng and the Tao. However, it will take a very long time for Yi to see it this way. I think what really solidifies Yi's stance on religion is how his parents choose to die where they were born rather than move to New Kunlun. Yi sees this as the ultimate danger that comes with sticking to tradition and Taoism rather than embracing technology. But when his parents make up their mind to not board New Kunlun, Yi decides to not eat with his family, even as Heng begs him to join them. He puts it off to another time way in the future, believing that they'll have more time, and that his work on New Kunlun is more important. We later see this reflected whenever Yi misses his parents' funerals and then accidentally leaves Hing behind again and again. He prioritizes his work to beat death over actually living out his life with the ones he loves, and again, their lives slip through his hands. After his parents die and Yi finally returns to Heng, the world is coated in the flowers born of the corpses of Solarians. Yi sees these flowers as completely horrifying, as not only are they a stark reminder of the insane amount of death throughout Solarian society, but he also sees them as deriving the world of its colors. Heng sees it differently though. It's still a sad scene, but she sees the beauty in the flowers, and the beauty of returning to nature and to the Tao, with the world becoming a beautiful reminder of the Solarians who once lived there. She has made up her mind and she wants to stay in Bengali. She believes that her parents haven't really left, and she still feels their presence. She has no logical basis or real reasoning for this, and she just feels it, which Yi can't understand. And then later, whenever Yi finds out that Aigon has been hiding the truth for him, he blames Aigon for killing all of his family and dooming Solarians. He moves to action and he attacks Aigon, ultimately resulting in him being cut down and left to die, missing the launch of New Kunlun and missing his chance to see Hing again. And so now he starts his quest for revenge. The reason that he believes the entire council was against him was because they were willing to hide the truth from him, and that's enough for him to hunt them all down and kill them. But from the beginning, this is all about revenge. However, over the course of the game, we do see his bloodlust fade a bit, as he tries to spare Lady Ethereal and Ji, showing some actual concern whenever they die. I'll talk more of the multiple endings and of his relationship with Shan Shan and Hing later, in their sections. But overall, I think Yi is a very tough character to figure out. He's both incredibly single-minded in his pursuit and specific in his hangups. He distrusts all that he cannot see, but he is also a magical mage who regularly crosses over into the spooky Tao dimension. He loves Hing more than anything else, but he is also completely unwilling to listen to her, even whenever she demonstrates the truth behind her beliefs by saving his life. Yi is a very stubborn little guy, and he's also not willing to ever give up, not willing to ever accept defeats. The myth that Yi gets his name from is also the myth that the entire story is loosely based on. Hu Yi was the greatest archer and in some versions was also the sun god, and he was ordered to kill 9 out of the 10 suns. Yeah, in the story there was at some point a period whenever there were 10 suns in the sky. The 10 suns lived among the leaves of the Fusang tree, an immensely tall tree to the east of China which served as the tree of life. Usually the 10 suns took turns going across the sky, but they got tired of that, and so they decided to all go out at once, which scorched the earth, drawing up all the moisture and generally just not being a very good time. So Hu Yi was sent to stop them, and though he initially tried to reason with the suns, maybe point out that they were killing everything, they ignored him. So he started blasting away at them until there was only one left. In some versions, he tries to kill the last sun for some reason, and so a brave boy has to steal his last arrow before he plunges them all into darkness. Notably, Hu Yi also marries the moon goddess Chang'e, who was the inspiration for Heng, although they are significantly less married in the game. So looking over the story, there are a few parallels to Nine Souls which stand out. First off, the Fusang tree. The Fusang tree is a mythological tree that is over 10,000 feet tall, and its appearance was likely based on the mulberry tree, which was a hardy tree that was used to feed silkworms. But Fusang was also a mythological land to the east of China, and is where the elixir of life was held by a volcano god who demanded a sacrifice. And I think this somewhat lines up with how Yi was given the immortality by the Fusang tree. And secondly, we also see that there's a young boy who stops Yi from shooting the final arrow. And I think this could parallel how Shan Shan changed Yi's outlook on the world. While he didn't stop him from killing 10 souls, as he wasn't ever planning on killing Kafu, he did put aside his own personal wishes in order to stop the killing of the 8 men. And another quick note is that I think the title of the game is pretty clever. It's 9 souls in English, which is Jiu Ri in Mandarin, which is kind of a weird way of writing 9 suns. But it also kind of sounds like a Dark Souls style name in English. I have no idea if this is on purpose, but they do mention Sekiro's influence many times in the Kickstarter, so maybe it was a 4000 IQ marketing move to associate it with Souls games. Also worth mentioning is that the name is obviously in reference to the 9 souls of the castle which you hunt down. Although in the true ending, you still end up killing 9 souls, but it's 8 of the others and yourself, as you leave Kafu as the only surviving soul. So Heng. Heng is Yi's sister, and the person he cares the most deeply for. And she is also the one who he worked tirelessly for in order to try to save with the Eternal Cauldron. The reason that he was so angry at Aigang for hiding that she had created the Tianhou virus was because of how the virus had affected Heng. But despite all this love and protection of Heng, Yi never listened to her. And he never did what she wanted most, which was just for him to spend time with her until it was too late. We see Hing and Yi's closeness first whenever we flash back to them floating between the ruined rhizomatic columns. Hing doesn't care much for school, but she's willing to sit and listen to Yi's stories all day. And she believes him to be the smartest person in the world, which, to be fair, probably isn't too far off the truth. One thing that I think is emblematic of the two going forwards is that in this scene, Hing is excited by the beauty of the ruined towers around them and wants to explore them, but Yi just sees them as another reminder of how technology has been shunned by Solarians, and he promises to one day restore them. Which also makes it all more interesting that in the future, whenever they are restored, the once bright and colorful towers are now a dark blue, looking much more cold and empty than they were in the past. We later see another flashback, where Hing recounts something that she learned in school, something that will become an important thematic point as the game goes on. The light that we see from stars is thousands or millions of years old. It's likely that many of the stars we see in the night sky have long since burned out. Quote, "A star leaves its brilliance behind as it burns itself out," end quote. So I think this is clearly a reference to how in the game, Solarian society is already pretty much doomed, despite everything the souls do to try to save it. So Yi has to choose whether to prolong that dying light or to let it finally end. Hang also proves that she has a deep connection with the roots here, as she points out that it's not only the stars that nourish the Fusang roots, but also the souls of people returning to the Tao. She hears a deep melody as she falls asleep at night as the Tao devours them. And even here, near the beginning of the game, the end of Solarians is very directly foreshadowed with the lines, quote, "How they," talking of the Fusang roots, "nurture new stories as others come to an end, for all eternity," end quote. Yi looks at it differently, in a more logical way. He doesn't think of the Song of the Souls as a way to remember past civilizations and stories, but rather it is just how the energy works, and how he can use that energy for pragmatic reasons. He doesn't believe there are souls in the roots, and so Hang just goes along with him, lying to avoid arguing with her brother for now. And so, after Teen Ho spreads and Hing and Yi's parents die, Hang decides to not go to New Kunlun. She's mostly gone along with Yi at this point, but she has finally decided that she can't imagine dying anywhere but Bengali. Even if Yi cures Teen Ho, she wants to complete her journey and return to the Tao on Bengali. She believes that how she spends the days is a lot more important than how long she lives. Though she still wishes to live, and she wants to do it with Yi. But Yi sees this as a betrayal. After all he's done to try to save her, she's just gonna die. But Hing responds that he's only ever assumed what she wanted without asking. He's treated her less like a sister and a friend, and more like a pet, and she's unwilling to budge on this. She's made up her mind. So Yi retorts that if she doesn't come, he will act like she never even existed, and she can't believe he'd say something like this. And then one of the most important and one of the most confusing lines is said. I still haven't completely figured this out. It comes up a few more times as the story goes on. Quote, "You're not at fault and I'm not at fault. We just made different choices." I originally thought that this was supposed to be wrong, that the game was showing that the souls of the council all ran from responsibilities and blamed others, as Yi was running away from his responsibility right here. But now I think that that's wrong. Whenever they say no one was at fault, they're right. There were mistakes, terrible things done, and horrible outcomes. But the souls of the council were just trying to save their people, and in the end those things they did didn't end up mattering that much. What mattered was what they had control over and what they did with their time, and that's where most of them and Yi failed, because he never came back. They valued running away from death more than they valued living life. It wasn't on purpose, but Yi fought Yigang, and he missed his chance to talk to Hing again, leaving on that last awful note of denying that she was ever his sister. And after this scene with Hing and Yi, we finally see the Solarians of the Council all believed that they as a species were special and were meant to outshine all other species. For Yan, though, it was their history and artifacts. For Gumong, it was the control they had over other species. For Jiquan, it was their willingness to play dirty. The souls put everything they had into survival. They'll exploit any species, abandon any religion, and leech off anything that they can use as an energy source, just to keep on living and keep shining. But like a dead star, they're just a remnant of themselves. Despite all that they have done, all that they have brought is pain, and all of their work failed to bring hope, and all of their atrocities were committed in vain. And so, at the end of the speech, we see the sun begin to set on the souls. Finally, we receive one last message for Hing, who has regrets of dying alone without Yi. She believes that Yi's plans have probably worked, and he has saved them all. She never doubted him once. She just made a different choice, and didn't want to leave Bengali. And Yi finally responds to this recording of Hing, expressing his regret for failing to return to her, and he promises to talk to her again after death, whenever they finally meet her again. Hing is based on Chang'e, who is Hu Yi's wife in mythology. They changed her role to sister in the game, which is probably a good thing. Chang'e is associated with the moon, as she lives up there, and the story goes that after Hu Yi shot down the 9 suns, and let the last one up there, he was rewarded with one elixir of immortality. But he didn't want to become immortal without also making Chang'e immortal, so he just kept the elixir at their house. But one day, an apprentice of Hu Yi came and tried to steal the elixir from Chang'e whenever Hu Yi wasn't home, and so she drank it in order to prevent the apprentice from becoming immortal. Then, she flies up to the moon to spend the rest of her eternity up there. Hu Yi returns and realizes what happens, so he gets sad and starts to leave her favorite desserts and fruits out on the windowsill for her, continuing with this practice for the rest of his life. In other versions, Chang'e steals the elixir because she's greedy, and then runs away to the moon, or gets turned into a toad. So the biggest parallels between the mythology and the game seem to be how Chang'e or Heng gets separated from Yi in both stories. It's also interesting that Chang'e is the one who gets immortality in the mythology, even if she isn't really chasing it, rather than Yi who gains it in the game. Some of Heng's storyline and some of her beliefs also come from a story in the Zhuangzi called Joy of Fish. The story is kinda hard to translate to English, but it's a short poem about some fish and some guys debating over if they're happy, how they know what the fish are happy, and why the fish are happy. There's a lot of layers to it, but the main takeaway that most people get from it is that we cannot know what other people do and do not know, which seems to deeply connect with Heng and Yi's relationship. Yi always doubts Heng's beliefs in the Tao, believing that he knows that she is just superstitious. And he always thinks he knows what's best for her, but he can't truly know what she knows. Shanshan is my favorite, and he should be your favorite. The main thing that drew me through this game was getting little things to give to him for him to mess around with. Truly the best mechanic in any game ever. Shanshan is the one who wakes Yi up, both from his hibernation within the Fusang, as well as from his way of thinking that he's held onto for so long. Initially, Yi doesn't want to let Shanshan stay with him, but he warms up to keeping him around pretty quickly. You can hand over various things to Shanshan, and through these interactions, Shanshan learns about Solarian society and technology, but we also learn a bit more about Shanshan. He takes very quickly to most tasks, like reading, writing, art, pottery, and more. And Shanshan often moves by feel in these things. He gets great results by just going with the flow, which goes along well with Taoist beliefs of how you should work. Unlike Yi, who's constantly bothered with morality and logic, Shanshan just tries his best. But you also see how he is tortured by the loss of his parents. And whenever he's given the VR set, he just spends all of his time with digital versions of them. He also quickly becomes friends with Kafu, Ruji, and Shinong. But even with all this kind treatment from Yi, it's shown that Yi still thinks of Shanshan as different from the other 8 men, separating the boy from the rest of 8 men and acting like he's completely different in order to alleviate the conflict with how close he's become with Shanshan and what terrible things he continues to allow to happen to 8 men. As Yi and Shanshan play space chess or whatever it's called together, Yi questions Shanshan if he believes that Yi is a villain. Shanshan says that Jiquan is a villain because he hurt Yi, but shouldn't Yi also be a villain because he's hurt so many people? However, Shanshan reassures him that since Yi worries about becoming a villain, he can't truly be one, as a true villain wouldn't care. And finally, in their last game, Shanshan admits that he's heard what's going on, and knows that there's little hope for the Solarians. He admits that he wishes he had just given up and never left Bengali. But Shanshan responds that, even if he would be living a much better life if Yi hadn't put into plan the things that happened to the 8 men, he wouldn't want that, as a life like that would be meaningless to him. Shanshan found meaning in the small moments of his life. In his memories, happy, angry, and sad ones, there's little logic to this, but he just feels it. It's what gives him meaning. So in the true ending, Shanshan overhears how Yi plans to return the 8 men to their planet, then him and Kafu return to Bengali, ending the soulscape. And Shanshan doesn't want Yi to leave him, and so he forces Yi to promise to take him to Bengali. Just like Hing, all he wanted to do was to spend time with Yi, and just like Hing, it wasn't meant to be. This time, it's for a good cause though. Yi might have been a monster in the past, but Shanshan knows he would never hurt him now, and he's right. Yi has become someone who's willing to sacrifice himself in order to save the Solarians from being mutated, and he's also willing to give up on his dreams of the cure in order to save the 8 men from continued slaughter. Shanshan might have not been given what he wanted, but he and the rest of the 8 men were finally given a chance. Shanshan is based on the Yellow Emperor Shanyan, who is a mix of the possibly real or historical figure and a mythological cultural hero. In the mythology, Shanyan is a great inventor and leader who invents things like the lunar calendar, wooden houses, boats, early forms of writing, and more, and plus he is sometimes regarded as an early progenitor of Taoism. In relation to the game, Shanshan is also shown to have a lot of skills in things like inventing, writing, and art, similar to the Yellow Emperor. Lear comes to us in a tutorial. Well, technically it's a realm where the forces of heaven and earth interact with space-time and consciousness, but yeah, it's mostly a tutorial. Whenever we first meet him, he's mysterious. A scholar who has studied for eons, but can't even begin to fathom the Tao. However, whenever Yi asks him on how it is even possible to get out of this realm, he replies that it's easy. You just have to realize what is natural and simply act on your thoughts, which sounds a whole lot like Wu Wei from Taoism. And whenever he brings you to the Tao, he doesn't know why he needs to bring you. He just feels it through the Tao. Like how Hing could feel the nature of the Tao, Lear just goes with the flow. Yi gradually also realizes that Lear is a scientist and inventor, someone who's both in touch with the Tao and with reason. And we also see that it was very easy for him to perform an upgrade on Yi's horn, which Yi remarks would have taken multiple lifetimes for most scientists. It's shown that Lear puts little effort into his work, and only really does what he feels like doing on impulse, but he accomplishes much. After Yi finally realizes that he's really talking to Lear from history, He explains how much he holds the inaction declaration against him. In the ruins, we actually see a recording of Lear's inaction declaration. And basically, after breaking 10 years of peace, Lear now believes that the Fengshi had become power-hungry themselves, so he seals off all Fengshi technology, only keeping the stuff that's helpful for average Solarian usage. The leaders of the Fengshi will return to nature, and this is also likely right before whenever Lear enters the Fusang route. Yi sees this as giving up on technology and losing thousands of years of progress for the Solarians, and it's shown that Lear does regret some of his past actions. As you see that eventually, even with all of his efforts to hide technology, it all came back, and terrible things have happened with it. However, I do think that he mostly made the right choice. We saw the terrible things the Fengshi technology created, as it turned Solarians into immortal, unthinking killing machines. Perhaps it was short-sighted to believe that its technology would be sealed forever, but Lear successfully created a peaceful world with better technology for ordinary people, where Solarians could still live in harmony with nature and with the Tao, so it wasn't a half-bad job. Yi has one last meeting with Lear before he returns to the Tao. He tells the tale of a demon dog and his companions who worked to rid the world of demons to free the humans who were tormented by them. But after killing all the demons, peace didn't come, and the demon dog's demon companions were corrupted, so he killed them. But that only left him as the last demon left. This reflects Yi's journey, but it also seems to show Lear also hunted down the 3 great sages that worked with him to unify Bengali, and he killed them before he went to the tutorial room. Lear also did terrible things out of revenge. So that brings the question of, will Yi really be able to bring hope to the Solarians in stasis? And what terrible things must he do before that's possible? What will he become? Yi must make this decision for himself. And Lear says that it's in his heart, and it's an effortless decision that'll have the best impact. So what will it be? So Lear is pretty much just Laozi, the founder of Taoism. It's said that Laozi was an important scholar in ancient China during the Warring States period, but he became disillusioned with his job after witnessing the terribleness of his rulers, so he left all of his belongings and decided to go return to nature. But before he could leave, he wrote down all of his knowledge for a guard at the border of China and, I guess, the border of China in the wilderness? What's he guarding? Anyways, that book of knowledge is the Tao Te Ching, and after that he goes out into the wilderness and is never seen again. I think that the connection of a scholar and Taoist, as well as a figure who left the society where he had a high place in it whenever it went against his morals, are clear. I think another important thing about Lear's character, specifically how he's viewed by Yi, connects to something I mentioned at the beginning, where some scholars, especially Western ones, look at Taoism and try to separate the philosophy, which they liked, from their religion, which they thought was kooky. This is nonsense. Similar to how Yi tried to disconnect the scientist Lear from the sage Lear, they are both the same person, and he is only as good of a scientist because of his Taoism. It makes no sense to disconnect the two. And also finally, I mentioned that Zhang Daoling was supposedly visited by Laozi in a dream, which kinda connects to how Lear visits Yi in the roots in the game. Kafu is the first of the souls that Yi seeks out in his quest for revenge. Kafu and Yi were once good friends, but after his betrayal, how could Yi let him live? Well, Kafu let Rui, Yi's AI, live, and so Rui advocates for Yi to spare Kafu, and so Yi does. My first time playing the game, I thought that this would lead to a trend of Yi not actually killing the souls, and instead sparing them, but I was sorely wrong. Anyways, Kafu is a big boy, and though he might have abandoned Yi, it wasn't something that he did out of malice or even on purpose. He genuinely believed in the rest of the council, and he expected Aigon to simply go and talk it out with her apprentice. But what he really did wrong, and what weighs so heavily on his mind, is that he never tried to stand up against Aigon, and instead simply went along with her out of fear. I think that Kafu is being used by the narrative to show that it's not just advocating for complete inaction, but rather for seeking harmony with your fate. This is starkly different from doing nothing and just allowing others to control you and do terrible things to you and other people. But Kafu isn't just defined by his failure, and whenever Yi spares him, while he's still hesitant about working against the council, he gradually becomes one of the most important characters. Kafu really did want to use technology to help improve the lives of people around him, and he really believed in the council and his role in the group, and in his eyes he was saving the Solarians. But ultimately, it's only by overcoming his strongest prejudice that he manages to become a leader who truly is able to help others. Kafu hates ape men, which is very common among Solarians. I think this was a belief that was very necessary for their society to maintain in order to stop people from thinking twice about harvesting the brains of people who have a similar intelligence to themselves. So when Kafu first meets Shanshan, he finally comes face to face with an ape man. Despite living on New Kunlun for hundreds of years, he has never actually seen an ape man, just reports of their harvesting. But despite him being annoyed and grossed out by Shanshan initially, being around him forces Kafu to realize just how much they have in common. And the first thing that I think really kickstarts this relationship is whenever Shanshan offers Kafu his bubble tea. This is a pretty illogical gift to give. After all Kafu has shown to Shanshan up to now is hate and disgust. But this gesture means a lot to Kafu, and we later see Kafu and Shanshan working together to make a reclining chair. We finally see some dialogue where Kafu acknowledges Shanshan as a friend. But making friends with one ape man isn't enough for Kafu to overcome his prejudices. And he just categorizes Shanshan as different from all the others, similar to how Yi treats him near the beginning of the story. And as we approach the true ending, after Yi begins to change his perspective on Ape Man and help out the village more, Yi tells Kafu that he wants to save the Ape Man. Despite all of his time spent with Shanshan, Kafu still can't believe that Yi wants to save them. But in the end, he completes his character arc by being the one to accompany the Ape Men back to the Blue Planet and also to help them learn how to live, overcoming not only his bigotry towards ape men, but also his inaction and fear of change, all in order to help people like he always wanted to. I also like the theories that in-universe, Kafu and the Solarians become the basis for what will eventually develop into Chinese mythology. Speaking of Chinese mythology, Kafu appears to be based on a figure named Kafu. Yeah, this one is pretty cut and dry, no guessing here. Kafu was a giant who chased after the sun. There are different accounts as to why he did it. Sometimes it's out of pure curiosity, and sometimes it's in order to capture the sun and turn down its heat a bit so that it stops frying people's crops. While running after the sun, from the east to the west, he gets thirsty, and so he gulps down the entire Yellow River and Wei River, and in some tellings, he catches the sun. In others, he doesn't make it, but it always ends with him dying of dehydration, and then turning into a mountain or forest. The tale is used in order to describe a person who is brave, optimistic, and willing to overcome all obstacles that stand in their way, but obviously also has a tragic end to it. I think this is one of the most interesting mythological bases for any of the characters in the game, as I don't think that brave, optimistic, or fast runner are what first come to mind for Kafu in Nine Souls. However, I think the game is making a point here, showing that these traits can be exhibited by anybody who has the best for others in mind and is willing to push through obstacles. Some more basic connections that I've found are that Kafu is also a big boy, though not quite a giant, and he's always drinking something. And the myth of Kafu is also often connected to the drive of the ancient Chinese people to control nature, which is also a huge theme in Nine Souls, and Kafu happens to embody it as he is the resident inventor of the game. When we first meet Gomon, she tracks Xi and commands Jiangxi soldiers. Jiangxi come from Chinese mythology, where they are a sort of undead creature like a zombie or a vampire. But in Nine Souls, Jiangxi are the forcibly reanimated corpses of Solarians, or in this case, ape men, who are forced to fight even after they're dead. Which once again reflects on the themes of the dangers of immortality. This time, Jiangxi immortality leads to the miserable existence, where it's not even clear if they are truly the same people, or just artificial inhabitants of the corpses. Golon only cares about control and power, as we see in her shard. She made these two ape men into Jiangxi after working them in the fields their entire life. And we also see that she grew a sort of sick, pet-like connection with them. And so she zombified them just to keep them with her. She sees herself as a sort of god, bestowing these ape men with the privilege to serve her after death. She claims to have always known the truth about Yi, and she sees him as ideologically bankrupt, impulsive, and self-righteous, and always believed that he would betray the council. Though Yi denies that Yigang had a favor between him and Gumon, I think it's obvious that Yi was Yigang's favorite. And Gumon resents him for this, which is probably one of the reasons that she was so inclined to believe that he would betray the council. She feels that it's fine to manipulate the masses, even of Solarians, and compares it to selectively breeding plants. Furthermore, she believes that not only are Solarians superior to all other life, but also that farmers and leaders like herself should have absolute control over society in order to shape it. This obviously goes against Taoist belief, as it rejects the idea of living in harmony with nature, and she is all about exercising the will of the self over the world. She believes that perfect society is only possible if those who aren't in power sacrifice some of their freedoms. And by some, she means she wants to mind control them, and she wants to put them all in slaughterhouses. Gumon, above all else, believes that might makes right. She is justified in controlling others because she has the power to control others. Simple as that. Also, side note, but I wonder if one of the reasons why Shanshan appears to be so smart to Yi is because the ape men have been selectively bred in order to make them as smart as possible, as that is what they're being harvested for. Gumon describes ape men as initially being dull and subservient, but perhaps one of the reasons in this universe that we ape men, or humans, are so intelligent is because we are selectively bred in captivity in order for our intelligence to be exploited. While it's true that Gumon only cares about control and power, that's not completely a bad thing. In her shard, we see that Gumon grew up in extreme poverty, always hungry, and because of the starvation, she sought control over the natural systems that once oppressed her. Her greatest wish was to prevent anybody from going hungry like she did whenever she was young, showing that she still had high ideals, but she executed them through horrifying means. She cared very deeply about proving herself and her power, and I think that one of the reasons she modified herself to have wings was to demonstrate her control over her own body. Gumon believed that after Yigan cured the virus, she would be the one who would rebuild nature in Bengali, shaping it with her own hands in order to finally demonstrate her complete control over her world and ecosystem. The narrative of Nine Sols seems to often reject the idea that ends justify the means, like how the 8 men are exploited to keep Solarians in stasis, or how Yigan covers up how she created Tainhao, and with Gumon controlling others in order to beat nature and free the Solarians of their hunger. Unlike the other souls of the council, who mostly ignored the plight of the 8 men, reducing them to numbers in the spreadsheet, Gumon interacted closely with them, ran the whole operation, and she loved it. And she even went out of their way to pick a few of them and extend their suffering way after death, refusing to let them rest in peace. Gumon was truly a monster, but at the same time, she was also one of the only ones in the council who didn't ignore the atrocities that they were committing. Gumon is a Chinese mythological god, ruling over the elements of wood and of life. He, yes, it's a he in the mythology, has the head of a man, the body of a bird, and stands on 2 dragons. I think these dragons could be subtly referenced in her area in Nine Sols as the faucets that are letting out polluted water. Within Gumon's region is a huge forest where the Fusang tree lives. Though this makes Gumon a pretty important figure in Chinese mythology, they don't really have all that many tales about them that I can find. Yinlao is a proper, wise elder who just wants to talk things out, sort of. I mean, he's also a coward who hides behind his cameras, Roblox, and comedically large video screens. I think that's sorta justified after watching what Yi just did to Gumon, and whenever Yi first comes after him, he bears Yi to spare a thought for the plight of all Solarians, not just yourself. Which is pretty ironic, as Yinlao was not a really big fan of doing that before. When New Kunlun was being designed, he used up an immense amount of space for all his and the rich folks' belongings, taking up space that was supposed to house supplies that would have saved many Solarian lives. As Yi chases him down throughout his warehouse, Yinlao constantly spouts off lines about the golden rule, the futility of revenge, of respecting your elders, and just whatever else he can get out to literally waste Yi's time so that a big robot can charge up and try to kill him. But while he is just stalling, I think that you can also see a lot of what he really has come to believe here, as he learned growing up that holding onto the past through heirlooms was necessary in order to save it, so that people in the future could see it too. He genuinely does just want to do his job of preserving the artifacts, although he almost focused too much on it, and ignored how it was hurting others. I really don't think there was any malicious intent. I also don't like Yinlao in the slightest, but he's mostly just pitiful, not hateable, which does make it a little sad whenever he just drops dead like that. He's the first of the bosses that dies, although I don't think Yi did this on purpose. Maybe he did, but it kind of just looks like he dies from a combination of his age, Tianhao's effect on his body, and the human-robot interface that he plugged himself into, as I don't think Yi actually shot him with that laser thing. But it's also pretty obvious that Yi could care less that his actions just indirectly led to his death. In Yinlao's shard, it is shown that, while for a long time he considered his possessions worthless, they were eventually useful to study as Yigan and the Council's efforts brought back technology. And so he finally recognized that everything had a value in keeping, and he just wanted to share that with New Kunlun after everything was fixed. Yinlan was completely corrupt, but I think it was mostly out of a lack of care for anything but his sole focus of protecting all his historical artifacts for the future, which led him to completely miss out all the suffering that he was causing with his hoarding. Also, there's no direct mythological basis for Yinlao in Chinese mythology. Unlike the other council members so far, Ji-chun invites you to come beat him up. Ji-chun greets Yi with a lot of insults and challenges, and while he calls out Yi for acting like a sort of hero who's taking revenge, Ji-chun believes that Yi is just as bad, if not worse, than he is. At this point in the game, the player will likely just see Ji-chun's accusations as a basic villain who claims the hero to be just like him, and assume that Yi is probably better than this violent buff guy who only cares about battle. But as we later find out, Yi has had a less than moral past, and he really isn't that much better than Ji-chun. This part really does paint Yi's quest for revenge in a much darker light, a light that Ji-chun was willing to call out. And as you answer his challenge and go to the fight, he's invincible and practically one-shots you, so it's not really too fair. After he defeats him, instead of killing Yi, Ji-chun smartly ties him up and tortures him, not allowing Yi to die, but also keeping him weak. Ji-chun knows of Yi's regeneration and of its nature, as Yi is immortal but still feels pain, which is a really clever use of the game's mechanics, but it is also basically Ji-chun's dream. Ji-chun is basically the ultimate masochist. He believes that pain makes a person stronger, that enduring is what forges a warrior. He says that, quote, one can only become a whole person after enduring mental and physical trials, which is a philosophy that sounds very close to some of what Mencius, a Chinese Confucian philosopher, espoused. We see that he has been transmuting himself for hundreds of years, using once forbidden technology in order to make himself stronger. And the transmutations are also incredibly painful. which is just a fun bonus for him. Before his transmutation, we can also see him talking with an unnamed seer, who is probably Ji. It seems Ji tried to warn him of Yi's return, which might have also been the reasons that Ji-chan knew to watch for the demises of the other council members. Before his boss fight, if the player does a bit of exploring, Yi can poison Ji-chan's transformation chamber, which makes the fight easier, but also humors Ji-chan, who thinks it's very funny that Yi is also willing to play dirty in order to win. In fact, he claims that Solarians as a whole are by nature evil and play dirty, and that's what makes them special. They must learn to be even more ruthless like Ji-chan and Yi if they wish to survive as a species. At the end of his fight, he tries to drink even more of his gamer fuel in order to have a FromSoft secret second phase. But he instead just explodes. We see in his shard that he grew up wanting to bring honor to his ancestors, but he was weak as a child, and he had to live through a lifetime of his family's legacy being trashed by others. So he took to experimental procedures to get stronger. He dominated the 8-man and used him as his own personal lab rats, testing the transmutations he would eventually use on himself. And he truly believed that it was necessary for Solarians to do anything, no matter how evil, in order to survive, and he was absolutely willing to embody this belief. His ultimate goal was to bring back the Jia kingdom with him as the new ruler, to finally be the ruler of all Solarians, united by true power. Power which they derived from pain, the voluntary pain of the warriors and the extracted pain of the prey. Ji-chan was an unbelievably brutal and cruel person, one who held great respect for his family past and wanted to carve his legacy into the skies, refusing to let the dying light of the Solarians fade away. His arc and his failure is an encapsulation of the arc of the Solarians as a whole, which is pretty neat. I've already talked about Mencius, who isn't a mythological figure, but rather a Confucian philosopher, who held some similar beliefs to Ji-kan. However, as a whole, Mencius really didn't have that much in common with Ji-kan, other than his idolization of pain, as he also believed that human nature is fundamentally righteous and humane. Ji-chan and the Jia clan as a whole are based on the Jai religion from the novel Fun Shun Yan Yi. Quoting Einyan Mei-la, a developer who created a great mythology background section in the Discord, Jai's religion's members are mostly demons and ghosts trained from animals. In short, they are the villains of this novel, end quote, which I think fits Jaikon's philosophy, as pain could be seen as a wild and primitive feeling that is used for training by Jaikon. This is the second game I've covered where Le Dream World Bad is an important plot point. I guess I just automatically like games where that happens more. Lady Ethereal is stuck in her soulscape, enjoying a comforting hot spring for all of eternity. She doesn't know where she is or how long she's been here, and she's forgotten Yi's name. But she is also glad that her and her researcher friends finally have a chance to take a nice little 500-year break after all that research they did. She doesn't remember what the research was over, but she does remember it was difficult. However, she's found peace in this place. Quote, it's a tranquil space with no pain and no suffering. What more could you ask for in life? We see that she loved leading research and was a kind and skilled mentor. But as Yi explores her soulscape further, things begin to seem off, which begins to promise Lady Ethereal's memory. Lady Ethereal knew that there was something wrong. She had seemingly created a perfect simulation that could hold the consciousness of the Solarians on board New Kunlun. They would be able to spend their time in a stasis of a wonderful dream. But it was too good. People who came out of the soulscape went mad, unable to return to normal life after the perfection of the simulation. I don't know if this applied to literally everybody, maybe only some completely couldn't come back. And for some like Aigon, it just messed with their heads. Or maybe I missed it, and the souls of the councils have something different than the soulscape, but whatever. It's also curious that Nuwa and Fushi would come out of the soulscape to party, as they can just do that there. This whole bit of lore is kinda confusing to me. Either way, after seeing this failure, and under pressure from the council, Lady Ethereal hid the problems with her soulscape and continued with the plan. She tried her best to fix it, adjust the simulations, but nothing worked, and this consumed her with guilt. And so, whenever she entered her own soulscape, she was tormented with ceaseless nightmares. A little bit after Yi enters her soulscape, she becomes more lucid, and she begins to remember her past. And so, with that, she begins to beg Yi to punish her. She hates herself for what she did, and considers her to be a cold-blooded murderer who killed her fellow scientists, and then trapped all the other Solarians in either bliss that would turn them mad, or nightmares that would make their existence a living hell. So, Yi attacks her. I actually have no idea why he listened, but I mean, I guess it's a clever gameplay thing. And finally, after being kicked out and then returning to the soulscape, Yi confronts Lady Ethereal one last time. She's seemingly more lucid than ever, as she remembers what the council did to Yi, as she expects Yi to kill her for it. But Yi doesn't want to, showing his kinship with Lady Ethereal, as well as possibly how his bloodlust has faded, as his quest for revenge has gone on. Lady Ethereal lashes out, trying to blame Yi for allowing her to release the soulscape of all of its problems. And she also states that the Eternal Cauldron is just a casket. Lady Ethereal has failed, and she wants to be punished for it. She doesn't think that she can atone for her sins through her actions. She believes that her time has passed. She wants to suffer. The reason that she had nightmares wasn't because the soulscape was accidentally giving them to her. What Lady Ethereal desired most was suffering, and so the soulscape delivered her a ceaseless nightmare. It got so bad that she even turned off her own life support. But against her will, she is now being kept as a brain in a jar by Aegon. So she fights Yi, in one last act of self-punishment. This fight is insanely well done, and it might be my favorite in the game. But after she is defeated, she finally finds some peace. She tells Yi that she has faced her sins, and now it's his turn. He spent the whole game pursuing the other souls for their sins against him, so it's about time that he actually faced some of the terrible things that he's done. While Lady Ethereal isn't quite based on a character from Chinese mythology, she and her whole simulation thing are actually based on a famous story in Chinese folklore, the Butterfly Dream. It's a very short story, so I'll just recite it here. Once, Zhangzhu dreamed that he was a butterfly flitting and fluttering about, happy with himself and doing as he pleased. He didn't know that he was Zhangzhu. Suddenly, he woke up, and there was a solid and unmistakable Zhangzhu. But he didn't know if he was Zhangzhu he had dreamt to as a butterfly dreaming that he was Zhangzhu. Between Zhangzhu and the butterfly, there must be some distinction. This is called the transformation of things. So yeah, this is the origin of her butterfly imagery, but also her connection with a classic question of how can you tell what is a dream and what is reality. And for Lady Butterfly, as well as the legions of Solarians stuck in her simulations, this dream that they've accepted as a reality is also possibly morphing into a nightmare, which is a lovely complication. Ji is the second soul that you run into on your quest for revenge, but he hides his true legs, so Yi doesn't recognize him. Instead, Ji presents himself as a random superstitious Solarian, hanging out in the Daybreak Tower ruins where he rants about seeing the future and hexagrams and stuff. Yi destroys Ji with facts and logic. But Ji explains that the Daybreak Towers, which it now stand in, were once the center of a completely different religion, now one completely forgotten. Well, except for Ji. Ji is immortal. He's been alive for who knows how long, and he's met basically every famous person ever, and has been there for the creation of basically all the historical artifacts there are out there. At least that's the impression he gives. Ji is an individual who's experienced so much, but he is also one who never asked for this uncanny ability. Everybody who he's ever loved has slipped through his fingers, returning to that Tao, while he just continues to live. In this first meeting with Yi, Ji mentions that Yi reminds him of somebody, an old friend he used to know, who I believe is Lear. Despite being immortal, Ji often proclaims the unique power of the now, and of the futility of holding on to these moments and trying to experience them through artifacts and histories. He thinks that these moments are like fireworks, and they should only be enjoyed in their moment of splendor, not immortalized forever. This does seem a little bit unfair. I mean, not everybody can literally live forever and be good friends with every important person ever to see them create these artifacts, but whatever. Despite being immortal, Ji has accepted that everything, including himself, will die eventually. He doesn't understand why people find it so hard to let go of things. After all, we all die. Why not just let it go? You can't fight it. But he is also incapable of letting himself die. Yi sees all this fatalism as pessimism, but Jesus speaking the truth as he sees it. It's not pessimistic to simply state facts. Ji reflects that core theme of letting go. The time for Solarians has come. And though they might delay their death for a while, it'll be at an incredible cost, and it'll all be for naught. While there are a lot of problems with the Eternal Cauldron that can be solved, such as the failing soulscape, the polluted agricultural sector, and even the new mutations, fundamentally, this place is flawed in its very design. It is a casket, and it will not bring about a peaceful end to Solarians, but instead a drawn-out, fitful, and meaningless search for a cure that will never be discovered. In the Grotto of Scriptures, Ji finally reveals that he's a soul. Ji believes that Yi is an important figure in history, one who will obviously leave a mark. And he calls him the new savior of Solarians on the island. I don't know if Ji really believes that he'll be the savior, but he does divine Yi's future determines a divergence, which he very rarely has found. And I think this likely refers to the choices that Yi can make between the two endings of the game. Finally, Yi finds Ji in the Royal Hall, which has been transformed into Ji's own personal library, constructed of huge stones. While Ji claims that he's only made notes to remind himself of important memories here, I think he was also trying to create something for future historians, as he could have just put it on like a digital thing. But carving it into stone will last for much longer. I don't know, maybe he's just so old he prefers to write on rocks and hasn't really figured out typing. It's here that Ji finally reveals his biggest secrets, his long legs. Also, he's immortal. He tells Yi that he sees this immortality as a curse. What Egon covets so deeply is what he wants to get rid of. but is too afraid to. But he's also afraid to be alone, so he joined the council to escape Pengali and also protect the grotto for Lear. Yi really doesn't want to kill him. His lust for revenge has softened at this point, but Ji lies that he's fated to kill Yi, just to mess with him a bit. Then he attacks Yi. On his deathbed, Ji thinks back on the countless lifetimes that he's lived and remarks on how it'll all return to the Tao. In his shard, we see that he was worshipped as a kid and witnessed many historical things. Then we see a Gong experimented on him to try to get immortality, and it ends with his final resting place in the grotto, as he's finally returned to the Tao. Ji does not have a mythological basis. For Fushi and Nuwa, you're introduced to them through Nuwa's shard. Weirdly enough, you just sneak in and steal it. And though you get a bit of backstory for their family, seeing how Nuwa was discouraged from lower class pursuits, and how her family came into power and the instability caused by the virus. However, her final shard is mysterious, appearing to be the outline of her brother. So every 10 years, Nuwa has been putting on parties. Sure, the Emporium district is falling apart, and there are walking corpses everywhere, but you just gotta get that partying in somehow. Apparently the soulscape just doesn't hit the same. And most notably, whenever Yi brings up the whole walking corpse thing, Nuwa agrees the Imperium district is falling apart. I mean, the food sucks, and the buildings are really tacky. She justifies her complete lack of care for the state of the sector she's supposed to be watching over by saying that she's an optimist. It's better to choose joy over moping around. And this choice of escapism and ignorance in the face of real problems is really what defines her character as a whole. She points out that they are lacking resources for the soulscape, possibly because of Yinlao's misuse of storage space. People are always dying in their dreamscapes, and all in all, the Eternal Cauldron has failed in Nuwa's eyes. Furthermore, she has chosen to ignore all the obvious signs that Fushi's condition is unfixable. He's become a shambling corpse, speaking in nonsense words and bubbling with mutations, as Nuwa has desperately tried to use Egon's cure on him. I think he's another representation of the Solarian people as a whole. Once a proud leader of his family, now a literal corpse who is being dragged around by his sister, who is desperate to pretend that all is fine. Although Fushi has some control over himself, as he fights Yi whenever Nuwa was perfectly fine with just giving Yi his soul shard. I suppose that Fushi could be being manipulated by Egon. Maybe the voice that appears to be him is really from her. Or maybe Fushi just has some mutation instincts in him that tell him that Yi is bad news for mutation monsters like him. And in the end, his mutation also kills Nuwa, stabbing her as she embraces him. In the shard, we see that Nuwa originally worried about class issues and poor people in Pengali, but Fushi just told her that it wasn't either of their faults, so they shouldn't worry about it. He eased her worries and let her forget about real life problems, letting her slip into her fantasy world. But whenever Teen Hao takes hold of Fushi, Egon lets him test a new cure for the virus she's working on, which mutates him. Despite this, Nuwa still believes that it's saving him, and the final crystal seems to show that the two are definitely in love. Oh boy, incest. Yeah, it's kind of in the background of the game, but there is quite a bit of imagery that suggests this. And, well, it also happens in the mythology they're based on. In all, Fushi is practically a non-actor during the events of Nine Souls, but his influence on Nuwa led to her running away from her real problems, the world, and partying away. While it's really hard to put her directly at fault for too much, as the mutations were Egon's fault, and the resource shortage were due to Yinlo, she's failed to stabilize the Empyrean Zone, which housed so many Solarians. She ran away from her responsibilities and from reality, and that ultimately led to her being killed by the object of her love, and also the object of her ignorance. Also, seriously, I do feel like Yi should feel bad that this happens. He doesn't seem to hate the two of them, and he seems to feel really bad for Lady Ethereal and Ji whenever they die. But he just kinda silently watches Nuwa get skewered. So yes, in the mythology, Fushi and Nuwa are very much married and also very much siblings. They are also the creators of mankind, with Nuwa in particular modeling humanity out of yellow clay. But it also usually specifies that either she only made rich nobles out of this clay, or she also made the poor people, but in a different way, either with brown clay or by dragging a string in the dirt. They also are usually depicted as snake people. Nuwa was said to have repaired the sky whenever the other gods broke a big hole in it by putting some colorful stones in the sky, killing a big turtle, and using his 4 legs as a pillar to prop up the sky. This is like a really big turtle. So in the game, we can see that there is a connection between how the siblings were the ones who ended up being the protectors of the people. In the game, they were given rule over an area housing a huge amount of Solarians, but also like in the mythological story, it seems that they have given special precedent to rich and noble people, both blocking poor people from getting on New Kunlun, which we see a bit more of in the prequel comic and in some logs, but also focusing only on partying with other nobles and ignoring the suffering going on right outside. Egon, the big bad who started this whole revenge story. I like how the game initially opens in such a way that downplays the sci-fi aspects of it all, instead appearing more sort of like a fantasy samurai game set on Earth. But after that intro, we don't see much of Egon for a long time. But finally, we reach her lab. Every good indie game ends with a lab. This game, Undertale, that's all I can think of. And here we finally read the full story of Teen Hao and Egon's fight against it. It all started with Egon's research into immortality. Though her clan's future was staked on her having some success with it, she also had a personal interest in its discovery. She was trying to meld Solarian cells with the cells of the root Fusan, but this fails, and a new, unknown virus is supposedly synthesized. Teen Hao. This virus spreads fast, and Solarian society begins to crumble. However, this does also allow Egon and her newly founded Tiandao Council to take control. Egon hides the fact that she accidentally created this virus from most, but she believes that she is doing her best to try to fix the problem she created. She meets Yi after his machine explodes, and his regeneration gives her hope that there might be a way to meld with the root Fusan and gain healing powers. It's ironic that the very thing that Egon and Yi ignored, Hing's faith in her relationship with the root and the Tao, was the very thing that saved Yi and gave him his regeneration powers, while their trust in science only led to the downfall of Solarians. But nevertheless, studying Yi's immortality results in nothing, and so Egon turns her focus towards Ji and his immortality, which she, for some reason, keeps secret from Yi. The study of Ji ends up resulting in Egon making a new serum. What could go wrong? Well, it takes a few hundred years to test, but it turns out that everything goes wrong. The Solarians mutate into purple guys. This breaks Egon. She starts to question the very purpose of her research. Why does she do all of this for hundreds of years just for nothing? Why was she even seeking immortality in the first place? And this is where she makes her decision. Driven half mad by the weight of her responsibilities and the toll of hundreds of years in her soulscape. She hasn't failed. This wasn't all for nothing. She's not giving up. After all, the solution to all of her problems, the very reason that the Solarians were cursed with Teen Hao, was that really it wasn't a curse at all. It was just a test. It was the last hurdle that they had to clear before they could evolve into another life form. That gross, stupid, and aggressive, but an immortal life form. I think it's interesting that these mutations come from Ji, but we also don't see any sort of purple stuff or mutations with Ji, even whenever he dies. But he also doesn't catch Teen Hao and turn into a flower, as his body just kinda stays there. Perhaps Ji's immortality was a blessing, and a curse reserved only for him, and that's why he mutated everybody else who they tried to give it to. But upon reaching the end of Egon's lab and going into her soulscape, it's empty, and it's a trap. We never do get to see her real soulscape shards. As she confronts Yi, she admits that she regrets not being able to convince him that it was acceptable for her to hide the truth from him. But Yi responds that he would have never accepted that, and if he was given another chance, he would have simply killed her then. I think it's interesting how Yi was never willing to budge of her hiding the truth from him, and her being the accidental creator of Teen Hao. It's messed up that she hid it from him, but I kinda understand why she did it, seeing his response to learning the truth. I honestly think that Yi was pretty much totally in the wrong for attacking Egon the first time. However, it's true that Yi always cared very deeply about truth, more than anything. He hated religion because he couldn't see any proof, and he was completely unwilling to forgive Egon for hiding things from him, even if there's understandable reason. That's where they're different. Egon was willing to do anything, to make any lie in order to save Solarian lives. She figured that she'd be able to do more good if people didn't know the truth between Teen Hao, so she hid it. Quote, what could be more important than staying alive? So she reveals that it was all a trap, and then forcefully takes the seals from him. She knows it was dirty, but she only cares about the pragmatic good that she could do with the seals. Only problem now is that her sense of right and wrong has been twisted, and now she believes that forcefully injecting all Solarians with the mutation is the best thing for them and the next step forwards. Finally, the boss fight. I think that this is a very good boss fight. I like difficult ones, but it does have a few annoying flaws that hold it back a bit. But overall, especially with a 3-phase version, this is an accumulation of everything that you've learned through the game turned up to 11. It's no Ishin, but it's fun, fast-paced, cinematic, and very hard. Although I do hate the hitbox and her dash grab attack, as she can grab way behind where she actually is, which is really annoying. Before they fight, Yi says the line, quote, "You're right, I can't." I don't understand why you would make the same mistake over and over again. Points to how Egon refuses to admit defeat. Even after her cure has failed, she still seeks immortality. Even after dooming her species, she still tries for the same goal, unwilling to ever give up. I also think it's interesting how she considers Yi her greatest achievement. I wonder if she had successfully gained immortality all those years ago, she would still consider Yi greater. But after being defeated in the bad ending, she goes peacefully, entrusting the future to Yi. But however, in the good ending, she doesn't give up and let Yi choose. But importantly, there is also an extra line of dialogue. She asks Yi how he's not scared, knowing that they might lose everything. But he responds that he is scared, but he has also learned how to accept failure. This is probably the most important line in the entire game, when Yi finally accepts failure and allows Solarians to die and humans to live. But I'll talk more about that in a minute. Egon hasn't learned that lesson though, and she injects the Fusine, shouting that Solarians will last forever and ever, a shining beacon in the universe. The star metaphor returns. If she succeeds, the Solarians will live forever as mutants, an eternal light of a dead star. I think that Egon thinks that killing herself here is a way to finally repay her debt to the Solarians. She's sacrificing herself in order to right her wrong. And ultimately, I do kind of think that in her own way, Egon was actually a pretty moral person. Her greatest moral failure was her striving for physical immortality. And according to Taoism, she should have instead been seeking spiritual immortality through the Tao. And she also never knew when to give up, eventually doing way more harm than good, even with all of her efforts. Mythology-wise, Egon is mostly based on the Queen Mother of the West, an ancient mother goddess in Chinese mythology that later became very important in the Taoist religion. She lives under the mythological Mount Kunlun, in a palace that is a complete paradise. And she was very closely related to the Peaches of Immortality, which, as the name suggests, were some really good peaches that gave you immortality. She was considered the highest deity for many Taoists. This is interesting, as she isn't really portrayed as a Taoist in the game. Egon is a leader of New Kunlun, however, and she is very tied to immortality. But rather than being a perfect being who can grant it, Egon is a mortal who spent her entire life searching for it, making her into a very starkly contrasting opposite to her mythological basis. So, in the bad ending, and yes, that is what I'm calling it, Yi defeats Egon and returns to Bengali, and we see him standing by the same shrine that he was standing by in one of his flashbacks. But where Hing once stood, there is now another flower. Then he gets in one of those horizontal elevators they have everywhere, and slowly travels to the right, passing rows and rows of 8-man brains, still powering the dreams of the last Solarians. And then we see there are 3 8-men, one of which Yi plays space chess with, while the big one lists off all the events happening with the Soulscape. It appears that Yi managed to fix all of the problems with it. And so yeah, that's just about everything solved for now. Yi can continue to keep a few 8-men as pets, while farming the rest. And the rest of the Solarians can live forever in a dream world. But why do I so surely think that this is a bad ending? I mean, the Solarians were dying out. And so it makes sense that they would be willing to do anything to save their species, even if it means endlessly harvesting the brains of 8-men. And hey, maybe eventually he'll get a cure. But I absolutely believe that this ending is the worst one, and not just because of the 8-man genocide, but mostly because of that. Even ignoring that, in this ending, Yi has learned nothing. He returned to New Kunlun, but not in order to return to the Tao or anything, but to continue his ceaseless run from death. He refuses to accept that Tin Hao is inherent to the Solarians, and he also still treats Shanshan like he once treated Hing, like a pet. Sure, now he treats some humans better. Sure, now he's back on his own planet. But nothing has really changed. I think it's very interesting how this is the ending where Yi fulfills his promise to Kafu to return, and finally follows Hing's wishes and comes home, as it's also the one where he violates her beliefs the most, never giving up and never returning to the Tao. Yi frames his choice to return as something that Shanshan will enjoy, and Shanshan seems to agree, but in reality, he's still keeping him as a pet, choosing what he believes is best for Shanshan without giving his people real freedom. And he's once again trying to take his most beloved person away from their home. It's also notable that Kafu is absent in this ending. While this could be nothing, what if, and putting on my conspiracy hat here, Kafu has actually died of old age, as Yi has been doing this for hundreds of years, and Yi has been replacing the 8-mans, who he calls Shanshan, with new ones every time they die. Continuing on how he treated Shanshan like a replacement for Hing, constantly replacing him with new Shanshans. The more I think about this, the less likely it seems, but also it would be poignant. So now let's talk about the good ending. Egon has just killed herself in order to infect the Fusang, and Yi is willing to do the same to stop her, but this time he's gonna say goodbye to those he loves. He has to abandon Shanshan, just like he had to abandon Hing, but this time, he spends all the time he has left talking to him. Yi tells Shanshan that he saved him, and he feels fortunate to have spent time with Shanshan. Just like Hing once said, what's most important is spending time with those you love. He lost all that time with Hing, spending it on research and then losing what he had left after he attempted to kill Egon. But he was forced to spend time with Shanshan, trapped in that 8-man village. Perhaps that's why the roots kept him dormant for so long, only releasing him when there was someone for Yi to take care of and get to know. And while the Solarians are doomed, Shanshan has brought Yi hope. Humans will be able to keep living. Some of those who he loves will be able to keep living. Yi quotes Hing right at Shanshan, and tells Shanshan that he will always be with him, through the Tao, and then he hangs up. Finally, Yi makes a sacrifice, and he sees Hang again. The humans step out onto the blue planet, which is already beginning to thaw. The root Fusan had grown to block out the sun, similar to how the Solarians had harvested humans in order to keep their sleep going, completely stalling the humans' growth. The structure of Nukunlun itself blocked out the sun and dragged the Earth into an ice age. And as the sun had set on the Solarians and the We Are Souls speech, the sun is rising for the humans. So, in the secret area, you see that the Tianhao gene was vital to Solarian DNA, and without it, they simply become cats. While this is sort of just a cat joke, I think that it also recontextualizes Tianhao again. We originally thought that it was natural, and maybe even part of the cycle of the Tao. Then we found out that Egon accidentally made it, which partially breaks this theory, making it into a horrible side effect of her search for immortality. And finally, we realized that it's kind of both. This virus that wiped out all of the Solarians was also what gave them their intelligence. It ultimately doomed them, but was also the only reasons that they were able to thrive like they were. Maybe it would have never triggered if it wasn't for Egon's search for immortality. But I think that it's more likely that she just accelerated the end. Or, if she hadn't found it, somebody else searching for immortality would have eventually. It speaks to the sci-fi fear of accidentally discovering or creating something through science that we can never come back from. Whether that be an AI overlord, like in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, accidentally broadcasting myself to a dark forest of hostile aliens, like in the Three Body Problem, or synthesizing a superbug like Tianhao, science fiction often reckons with these horrible ends. But while the other stories may end in tragedy, they also usually emphasize the power of human resolve, and the characters fight off an incalculably more powerful foe, usually winning in some small ways at the very least, even if they're wiped out. In Nine Souls, the plight of the Solarians seems to be completely futile, with the ultimate choice at the end just being to give up. Or is it? I think that it's wrong to look at this story and simply determine that Hing was 100% right and Yi was 100% wrong. It's a bit more nuanced. What Yi and the council did was understandable. The end of their world was happening. They were willing to do whatever cruel thing they needed to just to survive as a species. All the terrible things they did were also all their choices to make. Their desperate attempts to stay in the light just a little bit longer. But ultimately, it didn't work out. There was no path to a cure, and certainly none to immortality. That's when I think that Egon and Yi in the bad ending truly go wrong. They refuse to accept defeat, to free the 8 men, and to live out the rest of their days to the fullest. Instead, Egon infects the roots themselves, trying to poison their very connection to the Tao in order to stay alive in some mutant, unnatural way. Or Yi just ignores all the suffering he's causing to 8 men, ignores how he treats some like pets and others like food, and lives out the rest of his days endlessly working towards a cure, one that likely doesn't exist. That's their ultimate failure. It's not that they tried, it's that they refused to accept defeat. They accept a life of stasis, an eternal cauldron of dreams, a mutant shadow of life just because they fear death so much. And I also think that Chiyo and his brother's arc directly points to this. It is better to die than to be alive but to not live. But before you die, make the most of your life. So, that was 9 Souls. Welcome to WhyNotLevin. I'm properly going to establish this channel as my video essay channel. No more mixing it up with game dev. But if you're new here, I also have a game development channel called WhyNotLevin, where I develop my games and also have a bunch of older video essays over there if you want to check those out. Also a huge thanks to mythology, who created a fantastic resource on the 9 Souls Discord server, which categorizes all the mythological and cultural and references in the game for each character, and this video would have been much less accurate and some parts I would have completely missed, so be sure to check it out if you're interested in more of the mythology behind it. I hope that it gets archived somewhere other than the Discord server though, because Discord servers have a habit of just deleting stuff. Anyways, be sure to subscribe for more video essays over video games, anime, and maybe even some books, plus whatever else I feel like. I've got more videos coming out soon, so that should be cool. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.